The rain didn't fall gently in Chicago that evening. It hammered the pavement like angry fists, turning the streets into rushing rivers of dirty water. People ran for cover, newspapers held overhead, jumping over puddles and cursing the weather. Sarah Mitchell was walking home from her shift at the downtown diner, her apron still tied around her waist, her sneakers already soaked through. She'd been on her feet for 12 hours straight, serving coffee and pancakes to customers who barely looked at her. Her tips for the day sat heavy in her pocket. $43. Enough for groceries if she was careful. That's when she saw her. An elderly woman lay crumpled on the sidewalk near the bus stop, rain pouring over her gray hair, her clothes plastered to her thin frame. People walked past her. Actually walked past her. A businessman stepped over her legs without breaking stride. A woman with shopping bags crossed to the other side of the street. Sarah stopped walking. Her heart pounded in her chest. The woman on the ground was crying, one hand reaching out weakly, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Please, somebody help me." Sarah looked around, waiting for someone else to stop. Nobody did. The rain came down harder. The woman's hand dropped to the concrete, shaking. Sarah's whole body ached. She'd worked a double shift. She had bills due tomorrow. She had every reason to keep walking. But her feet wouldn't move forward. Instead, they moved toward the woman. She knelt in the cold water pooling on the sidewalk. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes opened slowly. They were blue and surprisingly clear, filled with fear and hope mixed together. "Please don't leave me," she whispered. "I'm lost. I don't know where I am." "What's your name?" Sarah asked gently, rain streaming down her face. "Helen. My name is Helen." The woman's voice cracked. "They took my walker. Someone pushed me and ran away with it. I can't stand up. My legs don't work right." Sarah felt anger rise in her throat. Who steals from an elderly woman? Who leaves someone helpless in the rain? "Helen, I'm Sarah. I'm going to help you, okay?" The woman let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "That's what they said before they left me here." Sarah looked at Helen's twisted legs, at the way her body shook from cold and exhaustion. She thought about calling 911, but her phone was dead. She thought about flagging down a car, but traffic rushed past without slowing. Then she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Helen, I need you to put your arms around my neck. I'm going to carry you." The old woman's eyes widened. "You can't. You're just a young girl." Sarah smiled despite everything. "I'm stronger than I look. Trust me." She bent low, sliding her arms under Helen's body. The woman was lighter than expected, but still heavy enough to make Sarah's muscles scream in protest. She gritted her teeth, planted her feet, and stood up with Helen on her back. Pain shot through her shoulders and spine. Her knees almost buckled. But she didn't fall. She took one step, then another. People actually stopped now. A man yelled, "You'll hurt yourself." A woman shook her head and kept walking. Sarah ignored them all. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, carrying this stranger through the rain toward her small apartment 6 blocks away. Helen's thin arms wrapped around her neck, the woman's breath warm against Sarah's shoulder. "Thank you," Helen whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." Sarah's legs trembled with each step, but she kept going. Because some things matter more than being tired. Some things matter more than being comfortable. Some things, like another person's life, matter more than anything else. If you're enjoying this story of kindness and unexpected miracles, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our inspiring stories. Comment below. What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Your support helps us share more stories that matter. By the time Sarah reached her apartment building, her vision was blurring. Every muscle in her body screamed for relief. Her breath came in ragged gasps, steam rising from her mouth in the cold rain. Helen had gone quiet on her back, and for a terrifying moment, Sarah feared the worst. Helen. Stay with me, okay? We're almost there. I'm here, came the weak reply. Still here, child. Sarah's apartment was on the second floor of an old brick building. No elevator. She looked at those stairs and wanted to cry. But she'd come this far. She wasn't stopping now. One step at a time, gripping the railing with her free hand, Sarah climbed. Her legs shook so badly she had to pause halfway up. Helen whimpered softly, and Sarah realized she was crying. I'm so sorry, Helen whispered. I'm too heavy. You should leave me. Never, Sarah said firmly, even though her body was betraying her with every tremor. We're going to make it. She kicked open her apartment door. She never locked it because there was nothing worth stealing, and stumbled inside. The apartment was tiny. One room with a kitchen area in the corner, a bathroom no bigger than a closet, and a mattress on the floor. That was it. That was home. Sarah carefully lowered Helen onto the mattress, her arms finally giving out. She collapsed beside her, gasping, her whole body shaking from exertion. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just lay there, listening to the rain hammer against the single window, both too exhausted for words. Finally, Sarah forced herself up. Helen needed help, and rest could wait. She grabbed the only 2 towels she owned and gently dried Helen's face and hair. The woman's gray hair was matted and dirty, her face lined with age and pain, but when she looked at Sarah, her eyes held something beautiful, gratitude. You saved my life, Helen said simply. Sarah shook her head. I just did what anyone should do. But nobody did, Helen replied. I counted 27 people who walked past me. I counted them. And then you stopped. Sarah didn't know what to say to that, so she focused on what needed doing. She helped Helen out of her wet clothes and wrapped her in Sarah's only blanket. She turned on the small space heater, even though she couldn't really afford the electricity, and made hot tea with the last tea bag in her cabinet. Helen's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the cup, so Sarah held it for her, helping her sip slowly. Tell me what happened, Sarah said gently. How did you end up out there? Helen's face crumpled. I live with my son. He's very busy, always working. Today, his assistant was supposed to take me to my doctor's appointment. A young man I'd never seen before came instead. He seemed nice at first. He pushed my walker, helped me outside. She paused, taking a shaky breath. Then we got to that street, and he just stopped. He said he needed to make a phone call. I was looking at the shops when I heard running. I turned around and he was gone. So was my walker. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. He stole it. I tried to call my son, but my phone died. I tried to crawl to find help, but my legs. Helen touched her twisted legs. They stopped working years ago. Polio, when I was a child. I've needed help walking ever since. Without my walker, I'm helpless. Then the rain started. I fell trying to get to shelter. And people just kept walking, stepping over me like I was trash. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. You're not trash. You're someone's mother. You're a person who matters. Helen reached out and squeezed Sarah's hand. What about you, child? You work at that diner. Yes, ma'am. I'm saving money for nursing school. Or I was trying to. Sarah looked around her bare apartment. It's slow going. Nursing school, Helen repeated softly. So you want to help people for a living? My mom was a nurse, Sarah explained. She died when I was 16. Cancer. But I remember how the nurses took care of her, made her last days bearable. I want to do that for others. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Your mother raised you right. Sarah made soup from the only can in her cupboard and fed it to Helen spoonful by spoonful. She checked Helen's legs carefully, worried about broken bones, relieved to find only bruising and swelling. She elevated them on her only pillow. As night fell, Sarah sat on the floor beside the mattress. exhausted but unable to sleep. Helen had finally drifted off, her breathing steady and calm. For the first time since Sarah had found her, the old woman looked peaceful. Sarah pulled out the money from her pocket. $43. She'd planned to buy groceries tomorrow. Now she'd need to use some of it for medicine if Helen needed it. Maybe some pain pills from the pharmacy. She should probably try to find Helen's family. But Helen's phone was gone, and Sarah didn't even know her last name. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow they'd figure it out. Tonight, she'd just make sure this woman stayed safe and warm. As Sarah finally closed her eyes, she had no idea that 6 blocks away, 3 black cars were speeding through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago. Inside the lead car, a man in an expensive suit was on his phone, his voice tight with panic. "I don't care how many people you have to call. Find my mother. Find her now." Sarah woke to pale morning light filtering through her thin curtains. Her body ached everywhere, shoulders, back, legs, but especially her heart when she remembered why. She turned her head and saw Helen still sleeping on the mattress, breathing steadily. Thank God. Sarah stood carefully, trying not to wake her. She needed to get medicine for Helen, maybe some proper food. She counted the money again. $38 after buying the tea last night from the corner store. It would have to be enough. She scribbled a quick note. Gone to get medicine. Back soon. You're safe. And placed it where Helen could see it. Then she grabbed her jacket and slipped out quietly. The morning was cold and damp, the streets still slick from last night's rain. Sarah walked quickly to the pharmacy 3 blocks away, her mind running through what she needed. Pain medication, antibiotic cream for the scrapes, maybe some bandages. She was so focused on her mental list that she almost missed it. A flyer taped to a lamppost. Missing. Helen Montgomery. Sarah stopped dead. There was a photo of Helen, dressed beautifully in a blue dress, smiling at the camera. Below it, last seen yesterday afternoon near downtown Chicago. Family desperately searching. Reward offered. Please call if you have any information. A phone number was listed at the bottom. Montgomery. Helen Montgomery. Sarah pulled out her phone, but it was still dead. She'd need to charge it at home. She took a picture of the flyer with her mind instead, memorizing the number. The pharmacy was quiet. Sarah bought generic pain pills, some antibiotic ointment, and elastic bandages. The total came to $22. That left $16 for food. On her way back, she passed a newsstand. The newspaper's front page made her stop breathing. Billionaire's mother missing. Family offers $50,000 reward. She picked up the paper with shaking hands. There was Helen's photo again, and beside it, a picture of a man in a suit. The caption read, James Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Industries, appeals for help finding his mother Helen, who went missing yesterday during a medical appointment. James Montgomery. Sarah had heard that name. Everyone in Chicago had. He owned half the downtown real estate. His company employed thousands. He was one of the richest men in the state. And his mother was sleeping on Sarah's mattress. Sarah bought the paper with trembling hands, leaving her only $11. She walked home in a daze, the newspaper clutched to her chest. When she opened her apartment door, Helen was awake, sitting up against the wall, looking frightened. Sarah. Thank God. I thought you'd left me. Never, Sarah said, kneeling beside her. I got you some medicine. And Helen. I need to show you something. She spread the newspaper out. Helen stared at her own face, at her son's anguished expression, and tears started rolling down her cheeks. James, she whispered. My boy. He must be so worried. He's been searching all night, Sarah said gently. Helen, why didn't you tell me who you were? Helen looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Would it have mattered? Would you have helped me more if you'd known I was rich? Or helped me less because you thought my family would find me anyway? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. I don't know. That's why I didn't say anything, Helen said softly. When you're on the ground in the rain, money doesn't matter. Power doesn't matter. All that matters is whether someone has enough kindness to stop. And you did. Not because of who I was, but because of who you are. Sarah felt tears in her own eyes now. We need to call him. Your son. He's worried sick. Helen nodded. Yes. But first, I need you to understand something. What you did last night, carrying a stranger through the rain, giving up your bed, spending your last money on me, that's who you are. Don't ever lose that, no matter what happens next. What do you mean, what happens next? Helen smiled through her tears. Call my son, child. And you'll see. Sarah plugged in her phone, waiting impatiently for it to charge enough to make a call. Her hands shook as she dialed the number from the flyer. It rang once. Twice. Montgomery residence. A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Hi. I found Helen. Helen Montgomery. She's safe. She's with me. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, hold please. Music played for exactly 3 seconds before a man's voice came on, urgent and raw. Where is she? Is she okay? Who are you? My name is Sarah Mitchell. Your mother is in my apartment. She's tired and bruised, but she's okay. She's safe. What's your address? The man, James, sounded like he was already moving, already calling to someone. Give me your address right now. Sarah rattled it off. 2nd floor, apartment 2C. I'm coming. I'm coming right now. Don't move. Don't go anywhere. Please. Please keep her safe. I will, Sarah promised. I promise. She hung up and looked at Helen. He's coming. Helen reached for Sarah's hand. Everything's about to change, dear girl. For both of us. 20 minutes later, Sarah heard them coming. The sound of multiple car doors slamming, rapid footsteps on the stairs, voices calling out. Her tiny apartment had never felt smaller. The knock on the door wasn't gentle. It was urgent, desperate. Sarah opened it to find a man in a wrinkled suit, his tie loosened, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Behind him stood 4 other people. 2 security guards, a woman in business attire, and an older man carrying a medical bag. Where is she? James Montgomery didn't wait for an invitation. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Helen. Mom. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside the mattress. Mom, oh God, Mom. Helen started crying immediately, reaching for her son. James. My boy. Sarah stepped back, giving them space, feeling suddenly like an intruder in her own home. She watched as this powerful businessman transformed into a scared child, holding his mother's hands, checking her over, his voice breaking. I thought I'd lost you. I thought. He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm okay, Helen said, cupping his face. I'm okay because of her. James turned to look at Sarah for the first time, really look at her. She was aware of how she must appear, in her stained diner uniform, standing in her bare apartment with peeling paint and a mattress on the floor. You're Sarah. She nodded, suddenly unable to speak. James stood slowly. You saved my mother's life. She needed help. My people searched every hospital, every police station, every shelter in the city. We had 100 employees looking for her. His voice was thick with emotion. And you, a complete stranger, were the only one who stopped. The doctor moved forward, kneeling beside Helen. Mrs. Montgomery, I need to examine you. Make sure you're okay. While the doctor worked, James turned his full attention to Sarah. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the worry lines around his eyes. Tell me what happened. Everything. Sarah explained, finding Helen in the rain, carrying her home, caring for her through the night. She left out the part about it being her last money for medicine. That felt like asking for something, and she wasn't. James listened to every word, his jaw tightening when she described people walking past his mother. 27 people, Helen called out from the mattress. I counted. 27 people walked past me before Sarah stopped. The doctor finished his examination. She's dehydrated and has some bruising, but nothing serious. She needs rest, proper meals, and her medication. But she's going to be fine. James let out a breath that seemed to come from his soul. Thank you, Dr. Ross. He turned back to Sarah. How much do I owe you? For the medicine, for everything. Sarah shook her head quickly. Nothing. I didn't do it for money. I know you didn't. But. Please, Sarah interrupted. Your mother being okay is enough. James studied her for a long moment. Who are you, Sarah Mitchell? Nobody. Just a waitress. No, Helen called out. She's a nursing student. Or she will be. She wants to help people. James's eyes sharpened with interest. A nursing student? Sarah felt her face flush. I'm saving up for school. Eventually. Where do you work? Sunrise Diner on 5th Street. And you live here? Alone? Sarah bristled slightly at the judgment she heard, or thought she heard, in his tone. It's not much, but it's mine. I pay my own way. James held up his hands. I wasn't criticizing. I'm amazed. You have so little, and yet you gave everything to help a stranger. Helen spoke up again. James, I want her to come home with us. Just for a few days, while I recover. Please. Mom, I'm sure Sarah has her own life. I want her there, Helen said firmly. She saved my life. The least we can do is give her a comfortable place to stay for a few days. And I'll feel better having her near me. Sarah started to protest. Really, I couldn't. You could, James said quietly. And it would mean a lot to my mother. To both of us. He pulled out a card from his wallet and handed it to Sarah. This is my personal number. Think about it. If you change your mind, call me. Day or night. The security guards helped Helen into a wheelchair they'd brought. A new one, top of the line. As they prepared to leave, Helen held out her hand to Sarah. Come with us now, child. Please. Sarah looked around her apartment. At the mattress on the floor, the single chair, the mini fridge that hummed too loudly. She thought about her shift at the diner in 3 hours. About Mrs. Chen who would yell if she called in sick. But she looked at Helen's hopeful face and heard herself say, okay. Just for a day or two. James smiled for the first time. Thank you. Grab whatever you need. Sarah packed her few belongings in an old backpack, some clothes, her phone charger, a photo of her parents. It took less than 3 minutes. As they left the apartment, Sarah took one last look back. Something in her chest whispered that she wouldn't be the same person when she returned. She just didn't know how right that feeling was. Sarah had never been in a car like this before. The leather seats were softer than her mattress. The air smelled like expensive cologne and new leather. Everything was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. She sat in the back seat with Helen while James sat up front with the driver. 2 more black SUVs followed behind them, carrying the security team. This is too much, Sarah whispered to Helen. I don't belong here. Helen squeezed her hand. You belong anywhere kindness is valued. And in my world, that makes you royalty. They drove through parts of Chicago Sarah had only seen in movies. Past towering skyscrapers, through neighborhoods where every house looked like a museum. Finally, they turned onto a private road lined with maple trees. At the end of that road stood a mansion. Sarah's breath caught. You live here. It wasn't just big. It was impossible. 3 stories of cream-colored stone, with columns like a Greek temple, windows that sparkled in the morning sun, and grounds that seemed to stretch forever. Home, Helen said simply. The cars pulled up to the front entrance where a staff of at least 10 people waited. A woman in a black suit stepped forward as James helped his mother out. Mrs. Montgomery, Thank God you're safe. We've prepared the main bedroom suite. The cook is making your favorite soup. Dr. Ross will stay on call all day. Thank you, Margaret, Helen said warmly. Then she gestured to Sarah. This is Sarah Mitchell. She saved my life. I want her treated as family. Give her the blue guest room. Margaret's eyes widened slightly. Of course, ma'am. Right away. Sarah followed in a daze as they entered the mansion. The foyer alone was bigger than her entire apartment. A chandelier hung overhead that probably cost more than she'd earn in 10 years. Marble floors gleamed under her worn sneakers. Miss Mitchell. A young woman in a crisp white shirt approached. I'm Annie, one of the housekeepers. May I show you to your room? Sarah looked back at Helen, who smiled encouragingly. Go on, dear. Freshen up. We'll have lunch together soon. The blue guest room was on the second floor. Sarah followed Annie down hallways lined with paintings, past rooms glimpsed through open doors, a library, a gym, something that looked like a movie theater. When Annie opened the door to the guest room, Sarah actually laughed. She couldn't help it. The room was enormous. A 4-poster bed dominated the center, piled with pillows. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens. There was a sitting area with a couch and chairs, a desk, and through an open door, Sarah could see a bathroom with a tub the size of her old kitchen. The closet is here, Annie said, opening another door. I took the liberty of preparing some clothes in your size. Mrs. Montgomery called ahead. If anything doesn't fit, just let me know. Clothes. Sarah stepped into the closet. It was full of beautiful things. Jeans, sweaters, dresses, all with tags still attached. Mrs. Montgomery insisted, Annie said gently. She wanted you to be comfortable. There's also toiletries in the bathroom, and if you need anything at all, just press this button. She indicated a small panel by the bed. Someone will come right away. After Annie left, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. It was so soft she felt like she might sink into it, and tried to process everything. 12 hours ago, she'd been a waitress living in a room with a mattress on the floor. Now she was sitting in a mansion, surrounded by luxury she couldn't even name. She pulled out her phone. Dead again. She plugged it in and saw missed calls from the diner. Mrs. Chen must be furious that she didn't show up for her shift. There was a knock on the door. Come in, Sarah called. James entered, and he looked different now. He'd changed into casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, and his hair was slightly damp from a shower. He looked more human, less like the intimidating billionaire from the news. Getting settled? He asked. This is incredible, Sarah said honestly. But it's too much. The clothes, this room. It's not enough, James interrupted. Sarah, do you understand what you did? You saved my mother's life. You spent your last money on medicine for her. You gave her your bed, your food, your care. You asked for nothing in return. Anyone would have. No, he said firmly. They wouldn't have. We have security footage from that street. 27 people walked past my mother. You were the 28th. You were the only one. Sarah didn't know what to say to that. James sat in one of the chairs, gesturing for Sarah to sit too. My mother told me about your dream. Nursing school. Sarah nodded. Eventually. When I save enough. How long have you been saving? 3 years. I've got about $8,000 saved. I need about $30,000 for the program. And you live in that apartment because it's cheap, Sarah said simply. $200 a month. It's all I can afford and still save money. James was quiet for a moment. My mother wants to help you. She wants to pay for your education. Sarah stood up quickly. No, absolutely not. I didn't help her for money. I know you didn't. That's exactly why she wants to do it. James stood too. Sarah, my mother grew up poor. Did you know that? Sarah shook her head. She was raised in a coal mining town in Pennsylvania. Her father died in the mines when she was 8. Her mother cleaned houses to keep food on the table. My mother wore the same dress to school every day for 2 years. His voice was soft with memory. She knows what it's like to have dreams that feel impossible. How did she? She got a scholarship to college. Worked 3 jobs to stay there. Met my father in her senior year. He saw something special in her, just like she sees something special in you. But I can't just take money from her. From you. It's not right. What's not right, James said, is a woman who would give a stranger her last dollar working herself to exhaustion while her dreams get further away. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. This doesn't happen in real life. People don't just. It's too much. It's not charity, James said gently. It's gratitude. It's one human being helping another, the same way you helped my mother. The same way you'd help anyone who needed it. There was another knock. Margaret appeared. Mr. Montgomery, lunch is ready. Mrs. Montgomery is asking for both of you. James offered Sarah his arm. Come on. My mother makes a mean chicken soup, and she's been talking about you non-stop. Fair warning, she's probably planning your whole future right now. Despite everything, Sarah laughed. She took his arm, and together they went downstairs to lunch, where Helen was waiting with a smile that said James was absolutely right. Lunch was served in a sunroom overlooking the gardens. The table could have seated 12, but it was just the 3 of them, Sarah, Helen, and James. Servers brought course after course. Soup, salad, the kind of bread that probably had a French name, and finally a pasta dish that smelled like heaven. Sarah felt awkward at first, unsure which fork to use, but Helen waved away her hesitation. In this house, there's only one rule at meals. Enjoy the food. Everything else is just pretending to be fancy. They talked like old friends. Helen wanted to know everything about Sarah, her childhood, her parents, her dreams. Sarah found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone in years. My mom was diagnosed when I was 14, Sarah explained. By the time I was 16, she was gone. Dad died 2 years later. Heart attack. The doctors said it was medical, but I think it was really a broken heart. Helen reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'm so sorry, child. They were good people, Sarah said. They would have loved knowing I helped someone the way I helped you. Mom always said, Sarah, someday you'll be a nurse, and you'll give people hope when they have none left. You already do that, James said quietly. You gave my mother hope when she had none. After lunch, Helen went to rest. The doctor had insisted she take it easy for a few days. James walked Sarah through the gardens, and for a while, it felt almost normal. 2 people enjoying a beautiful afternoon. Can I ask you something? Sarah said as they passed a fountain. Anything. Why did Helen refuse to let me leave? She insisted I come here. It's more than just gratitude, isn't it? James was quiet for a moment. My mother has good instincts about people. She trusts you. And right now, that matters more than you know. What do you mean? He stopped walking, his face troubled. The person who took my mother yesterday, the man who stole her walker and left her in the rain, we found him this morning. That's good, right? He'll go to jail. He's dead, Sarah. She felt ice run down her spine. What? They found his body in the river early this morning. My head of security just called me. James's jaw tightened. This wasn't random. Someone paid him to take my mother. To hurt her. But why? Who would? I have enemies, James said simply. When you're successful, when you have power, some people want to take that from you. And they'll hurt the people you love to do it. Sarah felt sick. You think someone tried to kill Helen? I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out. His eyes were hard now, all the warmth from lunch gone. That's why I'm glad you're here. You're the only person I trust with my mother right now. My own staff could be compromised. You can't mean. The man who took my mother knew our schedule, knew our security protocols, knew exactly when and where she'd be vulnerable. Someone inside my organization helped plan this. Sarah's mind raced. Does Helen know? Not yet. And I don't want to scare her. But I'm having my security team investigate everyone, every driver, every assistant, every housekeeper. Until I know who's responsible, nobody is above suspicion. Except me. He smiled slightly. Except you. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose by helping my mother. You're the only person I know for certain isn't involved. They walked back to the house in silence. Sarah's head was spinning. She'd thought this was a fairy tale. Poor girl helps rich woman, gets rewarded. But it wasn't that simple. It was dangerous. That evening, Sarah sat with Helen in her room. The older woman was propped up on pillows, looking much better after rest and proper care. James told you, didn't he? Helen said. About the man they found. Sarah nodded. How did you know? I know my son. He has that look, the one that says he's in protection mode. Helen sighed. Someone wants to hurt me to hurt him. I've been afraid of this for years. Why? What did James do? He's successful. He's powerful. He's planning to run for governor next year. Helen's voice was sad. Power makes you a target, Sarah. Even when you try to use it for good. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. Are you scared? I was, Helen admitted. When I was lying in that rain, I was terrified. But then you came. And you know what I realized? There's more kindness in the world than cruelty. More people like you than people who'd hurt an old woman for money. I don't think I'm that special. That's exactly what makes you special. Helen smiled. You don't see yourself clearly. But I do. James does too. There was a knock on the door. James entered with a man Sarah hadn't seen before. Tall, stern-faced, wearing a security uniform. Mom, this is David Chen, head of my security team. He needs to ask you some questions about yesterday. Helen nodded. Of course. Sarah stew. To leave, but Helen grabbed her hand. Stay. Please. David pulled out a small notebook. Mrs. Montgomery, can you describe the man who took you yesterday? Any details you remember? Helen closed her eyes, concentrating. He was young. Maybe 25. Thin. He had a tattoo on his wrist. I noticed it when he was pushing my walker. Some kind of bird. What did he say to you? Not much. He was quiet. But when we stopped on that street, he said he needed to buy a phone card. He let go of my walker and walked toward a store. Then. Her voice shook. Then he just ran. 2 other men appeared from nowhere and grabbed my walker. They laughed while I screamed for help. Sarah felt anger burn in her chest again. 3 men. It had been planned. David made notes. Did you recognize any voices? Anything that might tell us who they were working for? Helen shook her head. But I heard one of them on the phone as they ran away. He said, "It's done. The old lady's not going anywhere." James's face darkened. They wanted you stranded. Vulnerable. Or worse, David said quietly. If Miss Mitchell hadn't found you when she did. Nobody finished that sentence. David turned to Sarah. Miss Mitchell, when you found Mrs. Montgomery, did you notice anyone watching? Anyone nearby who seemed interested? Sarah thought back. The street was crowded. People were running from the rain. But. She paused, remembering. There was a car. A black sedan, parked across the street with its engine running. I remember thinking it was weird because the driver was just sitting there, not getting out. Did you see the driver? No, the windows were tinted. But after I picked up Helen and started walking, I heard the car drive away. Fast. David and James exchanged looks. They were watching, James said, making sure the job was done. But they didn't expect Sarah, David added. They didn't expect anyone to help. Helen squeezed Sarah's hand tighter. God sent her. I'm sure of it. David asked a few more questions, then left to continue his investigation. James stayed behind, pacing by the window. I'm moving more security into the house, he said. Guards at every entrance, cameras in every hallway. I'm not taking chances with your safety, Mom. What about your safety? Helen asked. If someone's willing to hurt me to get to you, they might try to hurt you directly. Let them try. James's voice was cold. I can protect myself. But I will not let anyone hurt you again. Sarah watched this exchange, feeling more and more like she'd stepped into something much bigger than she'd understood. This wasn't just about a stolen walker. This was about power, politics, and people willing to kill. James, Helen said softly, I think you should tell Sarah everything. She deserves to know what she's gotten herself into. James looked at Sarah for a long moment. Then he nodded. You're right. Sarah, there's something you need to understand about the situation you've walked into. He pulled up a chair and sat down, his expression serious. 6 months ago, I announced my intention to run for governor. My platform is anti-corruption, cleaning up the construction industry, investigating contractors who cut corners and bribe officials. I've already gathered evidence against some of the most powerful people in the state. Sarah's eyes widened. And they want to stop you. By any means necessary. 3 weeks ago, my campaign manager's car was run off the road. He survived, but barely. 2 weeks ago, my accountant's house was broken into. Nothing stolen, but his files were gone through. And now my mother. They're sending a message, David had said before he left. Back off, or the people you love will suffer. But you're not backing off, Sarah said. No. James's voice was firm. Because if I do, they win. And thousands of people, working people, people like you, Sarah, will continue to be exploited and hurt by a corrupt system. Helen spoke up. I told him to drop it, to withdraw from the race. But he won't listen to his old mother. Because you raised me to stand up for what's right, James said gently. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. Sarah understood now why Helen had insisted she come here. Not just for gratitude, but for protection. Sarah was the one person who'd proven she'd protect Helen without question, without ulterior motive. I need to ask you something, James said, looking at Sarah seriously. And I want you to feel completely free to say no. I would understand. What is it? I want to hire you. Officially. As my mother's personal companion and caregiver. You'd live here, make sure she's safe, keep her company. I can't trust my regular staff right now, not until I know who's involved in this conspiracy. You want me to be her bodyguard? I want you to be her friend, James corrected. Someone she trusts. Someone I trust. The security team will handle the actual protection, but I need someone with her at all times who I know has her best interests at heart. And I'd pay you, he added quickly. A proper salary. $50,000 for 3 months, through the election. After that, if you still want to go to nursing school, I'll pay for your entire education. Books, tuition, housing, everything. Sarah's head spun. $50,000. 3 months. That was more than she made in 2 years at the diner. And if I say no? Then you say no, James said simply. You don't owe us anything, Sarah. You already saved my mother's life. I would never hold that over you or pressure you to stay in a dangerous situation. Helen reached for her hand. But I hope you'll say yes, child. Not just because I need you. Because I've come to care about you. In one day, you've become like a daughter to me. Sarah looked at Helen's hopeful face, at James's sincere expression. She thought about her empty apartment, her angry boss at the diner, her slowly growing savings account that would take 5 more years to reach her goal. And she thought about Helen lying in the rain, 27 people walking past, and how wrong that had been. "I'll stay," she said. "But not for the money. I'll stay because nobody should have to go through what you went through alone. I'll stay because it's the right thing to do." James smiled, a real smile this time. "Thank you. But I have one condition," Sarah added. "Name it. If this gets too dangerous, if you think I'm in real danger, you promise to send me away. I'm willing to help, but I'm not willing to die for politics." "Deal," James said immediately. "Though I promise you, with the security I'm putting in place, you'll be safer here than anywhere else in Chicago." Helen pulled Sarah into a hug. "Thank you, my dear girl. Thank you." That night, Sarah lay in the enormous bed in the blue guest room, staring at the ceiling. 24 hours ago, she'd been a waitress with dreams that seemed impossible. Now she was living in a mansion, being paid more money than she'd ever seen, caught in the middle of a political conspiracy. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. "Security briefing tomorrow at 9 a.m. Welcome to the team." Sarah smiled despite everything. Then she whispered to the ceiling, to her parents, to whoever might be listening. "I hope I know what I'm doing." Outside her window, in the shadows of the garden, a security camera turned slowly, recording everything. And in a car parked 3 blocks away, a figure watched the mansion through binoculars, making notes, planning. The game was far from over. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the massive windows and, for a confused moment, forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. Helen, the mansion, the danger, her new job. A soft knock on the door. "Miss Mitchell? Breakfast is in 30 minutes. And Mr. Montgomery would like to see you in the security office afterward." Sarah showered in the palatial bathroom, still amazed by the water pressure and the endless hot water. She dressed in some of the clothes that had been provided, dark jeans and a simple sweater, and made her way downstairs. Helen was already at breakfast, looking much stronger. Her color was better, and she smiled warmly when Sarah entered. "Good morning, my dear. Did you sleep well?" "Like I was in a cloud," Sarah admitted, sitting down. "That bed is incredible." "Good. You needed rest." Helen's expression turned more serious. "James told me about your conversation last night. About you staying on. I can't tell you what that means to me." A server brought coffee and fresh fruit. Sarah was still getting used to being served, to not having to do everything herself. "Mrs. Montgomery." "Helen," the older woman interrupted. "Please, call me Helen." "Helen," Sarah corrected. "Can I ask you something? Why did someone like you end up alone yesterday? Where was your security?" Helen's face clouded. "That's a good question. I usually have a driver and a security guard when I go anywhere. But yesterday, James was at an important meeting downtown, and most of the security team was with him. Someone called and said they were sending a replacement assistant to take me to my doctor's appointment." "Someone called? Who?" "They said they were from James's office." The voice sounded official. Professional. Helen shook her head. "I'm an old woman. I didn't question it. I trusted them. So whoever did this knew enough about your schedule and James's security to call with a credible story." "Exactly. Which means it's someone close. Someone who knows how we operate." James appeared in the doorway, dressed in a suit, looking like he'd already been awake for hours. "Ready for that security briefing?" The security office was in the basement of the mansion, a high-tech operations center that looked like something from a movie. Multiple screens showed camera feeds from around the property. David Chen stood at a large table covered with papers and photographs. "Good morning, Miss Mitchell," David said professionally. "Thank you for agreeing to help us." "Call me Sarah, please." David nodded and gestured to the table. "Let me show you what we've learned." He pointed to a photograph of a young man, the one who'd taken Helen. "This is Marcus Rivera, age 24. Small-time criminal, usually petty theft and fraud. Not the type who usually works violent jobs." But someone paid him enough to try, James added grimly. We traced his phone records, David continued. In the week before the incident, he received 3 calls from a burner phone. We can't trace the owner, but the calls came from a cell tower near downtown, specifically, near the building where your company's main rival has their headquarters. James leaned forward. Blackwell Industries. Tell me about them, Sarah said. Richard Blackwell owns the largest construction company in Illinois, James explained. He's also the most corrupt. He's been accused of bribing officials, using substandard materials, ignoring safety regulations. 3 workers died on his sites last year alone. And you were going to expose him. I am going to expose him, James corrected. I have evidence, emails, financial records, witness statements. When I'm governor, I'll have the power to launch a full investigation. Blackwell will lose his licenses, probably face criminal charges. So he has motive, Sarah said, understanding. If he can't stop your campaign, he's desperate. David pulled out another photograph. This one showed a woman in her 30s, professionally dressed. This is Clara Bennett. She's worked as a household staff coordinator for the Montgomery family for 2 years. Sarah's stomach dropped. She's the inside person? We think so. She was the one who would have arranged transportation for Mrs. Montgomery. She had access to the family's schedule. And, David pulled out a bank statement. 3 days ago, she deposited $25,000 in cash into her personal account. Where is she now? James asked, his voice dangerous. She called in sick yesterday and hasn't been seen since. We have people looking for her. Sarah studied the photograph. Clara had a kind face, the type of person you'd trust immediately. She seemed so normal when I first got here. That's what makes her perfect for this kind of work, David said. Nobody suspects the helpful assistant. James paced the room, his hands clenched. So Blackwell hired Clara to arrange my mother's accident. Clara contacted Marcus Rivera to do the actual job. They left my mother to die in the rain, thinking it would look like she just wandered off and collapsed. And if it had worked, David added quietly, you'd have been devastated, distracted, possibly dropping out of the race to deal with family tragedy. But it didn't work, Sarah said, because someone found her. James turned to look at her, his expression softening. Because you found her. You ruined their entire plan. Which means, David said seriously, they might see you as a problem now too. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. You think they'll come after me? I think they'll be watching you, David said. Which is why you need to understand the security protocols we have in place. For the next hour, David walked Sarah through the mansion's security system. Cameras everywhere, guards posted at all entrances, panic buttons in every room. He gave her a special phone, encrypted, with direct lines to security. If you see anything suspicious, anything at all, you call immediately, David emphasized. Don't try to investigate yourself. Don't assume it's nothing. I understand. Good. Now, when you're with Mrs. Montgomery, you stay in view of cameras at all times. Don't go into any rooms alone with people you don't know. Don't accept any food or drinks from staff members unless you've watched them prepare it. You think someone might try to poison us? I think we shouldn't rule anything out, David said grimly. James walked Sarah back upstairs after the briefing. I know this is overwhelming, he said. And I'd understand if you wanted to change your mind about staying. Sarah thought about Helen's smile at breakfast, about how trusting and kind the older woman was despite everything she'd been through. I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly. Good. Because my mother's already planning your birthday party. My birthday isn't for 6 months. She doesn't care. She's excited to have someone to fuss over. James smiled. Fair warning, she's going to try to set you up with every eligible bachelor she knows. She's been trying to marry me off for years, but I'm too busy. So now you're her project. Despite the tension, Sarah laughed. I can handle that. They found Helen in the sunroom, working on needlepoint. She looked up brightly when they entered. There you are. Sarah, dear, come sit with me. I want to teach you embroidery. I don't know how. Perfect. I'll teach you. For the next few hours, Sarah sat with Helen, learning to make tiny, careful stitches in fabric. It was peaceful, almost meditative. Helen talked about her childhood, her late husband, raising James as a single mother after his father died. He was just 10 years old, Helen said softly. Too young to lose his father. But he became the man of the house. Too serious, too grown up, too fast. He seems to carry a lot on his shoulders. He does. Always has. That's why I worry about this governor campaign. It's not that I don't think he'd be wonderful at it. He would be. But the cost. She trailed off, then smiled. But that's not for you to worry about. Tell me about you. Have you ever been in love? Sarah blushed. Not really. I've been too busy working and saving money to think about dating. That's about to change, Helen said with a knowing smile. Now that you're here, with time to breathe, you'll start noticing things. Or people noticing you. Helen. I'm just saying, my son has very good taste. And he hasn't stopped talking about you since yesterday. Sarah's face burned. He's just being grateful. Hum. We'll see. That evening, James invited Sarah to join him for dinner. Helen claimed to be tired and encouraged them to eat together, though Sarah suspected she was matchmaking. They ate in a smaller dining room, just the two of them. The conversation was easy, natural. James asked about her life before the diner, her parents, her dreams. Sarah found herself telling him things she'd never told anyone. My dad was a mechanic, she said. He could fix anything. He used to say, Sarah, the world is full of broken things. The question is whether you're the kind of person who walks past them or stops to help. James was quiet for a moment. He'd be proud of you. You stopped. I still miss them. Every day. Loss never really goes away, James said softly. I lost my father when I was young. You just learn to carry it differently. They talked until late, about everything and nothing. Sarah found herself forgetting that James was a billionaire, that she was just a waitress. He was just a person. A good one. When they finally said goodnight, James paused at the bottom of the stairs. Sarah, thank you for staying. It means more than you know. Thank you for trusting me. Sarah went to bed feeling lighter than she had in years. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they were in the eye of the storm. That things were about to get worse before they got better. She was right. At 2:47 a.m., alarms blared throughout the mansion. Sarah jerked awake, her heart pounding. Red lights flashed in the hallways. She grabbed her phone and called security like David had taught her. What's happening? Someone tried to breach the perimeter, came the terse reply. Stay in your room. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except Mr. Montgomery or myself. Sarah ran to Helen's room. The older woman was awake, looking frightened. Sarah. What's going on? I don't know yet. But we're staying together. They huddled in Helen's room, listening to shouts and running footsteps. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from James. Intruder caught. You're safe. Stay with Mom. Coming to you soon. 10 minutes later, James appeared at the door with David. His face was grim. We caught someone trying to break in through the east garden, he said. When we searched him, he had a gun and a photograph. A photograph of what? Helen asked. James hesitated, then showed them his phone. The photograph was of Sarah. The morning after the break-in attempt, the mansion felt different. More guards patrolled the grounds. The friendly atmosphere had been replaced with tension thick enough to cut. Sarah sat in the security office again, this time staring at her own face in a surveillance photograph. The intruder had been carrying it in his pocket, along with detailed notes about her schedule, When she woke up, where her room was located, her usual movements throughout the day. How did they get this information? She asked, her voice shakier than she wanted it to be. David looked grim. That's what worries me. These details are recent, from the last 2 days. Someone inside the house has been watching you and reporting back. James stood by the window, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. After we arrested Clara, we thought we'd caught the mole. But there's another one. Someone we haven't identified yet. The intruder won't talk? Sarah asked. He lawyered up immediately. Professional criminal, not like Marcus Rivera. This is someone who knows how to keep his mouth shut. Helen sat in a wheelchair nearby. She'd insisted on being present for this meeting. Sarah, dear, maybe it's time you left. This has become too dangerous. No, Sarah said immediately. If I leave, you'll be alone again. They already tried to hurt you once. But they're targeting you now, Helen protested. I can't live with myself if something happens to you because of me. Nothing's going to happen to her, James said firmly. I'm bringing in additional security from my company's corporate headquarters. Former Secret Service, military special forces. The best protection money can buy. There's something else, David added reluctantly. The intruder had a note in his pocket. It said, "Remove the girl. She's complicating things." Sarah felt cold. Remove. That's a nice way of saying kill, isn't it? No one answered, which was answer enough. James turned from the window. David, I want every single staff member interrogated. Background checks redone. Financial records examined. I don't care if someone's worked for my family for 20 years. Everyone gets vetted again. That's going to upset a lot of people, David warned. Good. Let them be upset. One of them is a traitor trying to murder my mother and Sarah. Helen reached for Sarah's hand. I'm so sorry, child. You saved my life, and now your life is in danger because of it. This isn't your fault, Sarah said firmly. This is the fault of whoever is trying to hurt your family. Over the next few days, the investigation intensified. Staff members were called in one by one for interviews. The atmosphere in the mansion became paranoid. People whispered in corners, avoided eye contact, jumped at sudden noises. Sarah stayed close to Helen, as instructed. They spent hours together in the sunroom, in Helen's bedroom, in the private library. Despite the danger, Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying the older woman's company. Helen told stories about her youth, about meeting James's father, about the early days when they'd had nothing but dreams. We lived in a tiny apartment, Helen remembered, smiling. 1 bedroom, no heat in winter. James's father worked 3 jobs. I took in laundry and watched other people's children. But we were happy. Love makes you rich even when you're poor. When did things change? When James was 5, his father invented a new type of concrete mixture, stronger, cheaper to produce. He started a small construction company with borrowed money. Within 10 years, we'd gone from that tiny apartment to our first real house. Helen's smile faded. And with money came envy. People who smiled to our faces but wished for our failure. Some people never change. James joined them whenever he could, though he was clearly consumed with the investigation. He looked tired, the stress showing in the lines around his eyes. One evening, after Helen had gone to bed, James found Sarah in the library. She was reading a nursing textbook. She'd asked for some and James had bought her an entire set. Studying already? He asked, settling into the chair across from her. Might as well use this time productively. Besides, it helps distract me from wondering if someone in this house wants me dead. James winced. I'm sorry. This isn't what you signed up for. Actually, it kind of is. You told me it might be dangerous. Sarah closed her book. Have you found anything? Any leads on who the second mole might be? Maybe. There's a groundskeeper, worked here for 8 months. His background check came back with some inconsistencies. David's bringing him in for questioning tomorrow. And the man who broke in? Still not talking. James shook his head. But his lawyer is expensive. Very expensive. Someone with deep pockets is backing him. Blackwell. Almost certainly. But proving it is another matter. James rubbed his face tiredly. Sometimes I wonder if I should just drop out of the race. If it would make all this stop. Would it? Probably not. I've already gathered too much evidence against Blackwell. Even if I'm not governor, I can give that evidence to the authorities. He won't feel safe until I'm neutralized. The word hung in the air between them. Your mother said you became too serious too young, Sarah said quietly. That you grew up too fast. She told you that? She worries about you. Says you carry too much. James was quiet for a moment. When my father died, I was 10 years old. And I remember standing at his funeral, listening to people say nice things about him, and thinking, someone has to take care of Mom now. Someone has to make sure we don't lose everything Dad built. I guess I've been carrying that weight ever since. Maybe you don't have to carry it alone. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, understanding, connection, something neither of them quite knew how to name. Sarah, James started, but was interrupted by his phone ringing. He answered, his expression changing. When? Where? He listened, then stood abruptly. I'll be right there. What happened? They found Clara Bennett. Clara was in an interview room in the mansion's security wing, a part of the house Sarah hadn't known existed. Through one-way glass, Sarah watched as David questioned the woman who'd betrayed Helen. Clara looked different from her photograph. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. She was crying. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt, she was saying. They told me it would just be a scare. That Mrs. Montgomery would be fine, just confused for a while. But you knew they were taking her walker, David said calmly. You knew she couldn't walk without it. You knew leaving her in the rain could kill her. I needed the money. Clara's voice rose. My daughter is sick. Leukemia. The treatments are so expensive, and I didn't have insurance and... So you sold out a woman who trusted you. Clara put her face in her hands. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. James stood beside Sarah, his face unreadable. Do you believe her? Sarah asked. About her daughter? Probably. About not meaning harm? No. His voice was cold. She knew exactly what she was doing. The money made it easy to ignore her conscience. Through the glass, David leaned forward. Clara, I need you to tell me who paid you. Who set this up? I don't know his real name. He called himself Mr. Black. We only ever talked on the phone. Describe his voice. Older. Maybe 50s or 60s. He had an accent, sounded educated. Rich. Could it have been Richard Blackwell? Clara shook her head. I don't know. I've never met Blackwell. But... She hesitated. But what? He said something once. When he was giving me instructions. He said, this is what happens to people who threaten the order of things. And he laughed. Like it was funny. Sarah felt sick. This man, whoever he was, thought destroying lives was amusing. Did he mention anyone else? David pressed. Anyone else in the house working with you? Clara looked up, surprised. What? No, it was just me. He said I was the only one he needed. David and James exchanged glances. Through the glass, Sarah could see them both thinking the same thing. Clara was telling the truth. Which meant the second mole wasn't connected to her. They were dealing with two separate conspiracies. After the interrogation, James called an emergency meeting with his core team, David, his campaign manager, his lawyer, and Sarah. Helen insisted Sarah be included in all security decisions. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, the campaign manager said. We have two different groups trying to hurt your family. It appears so, David confirmed. Clara was hired by someone, probably Richard Blackwell, to arrange Mrs. Montgomery's accident. But the intruder from 3 days ago was part of a different operation. Different tactics, different objectives. Who else would want to hurt James? The lawyer asked. My enemies list is unfortunately long, James said dryly. Blackwell is the most obvious because of the gubernatorial race. But I've also prosecuted fraud cases, shut down illegal operations, testified against corrupt officials. Any number of people might want revenge. Sarah spoke up. But why target me? I'm nobody. What do I have to do with James's political career? Everyone turned to look at her. James's campaign manager, a sharp woman named Patricia, tilted her head thoughtfully. Actually, you're not nobody anymore. The media got wind of the story. Waitress saves billionaire's mother has been trending on social media for 2 days. You're becoming, well, kind of a symbol. A symbol of what? Of ordinary goodness, Patricia said. Of someone who helped without expecting anything in return. James has been positioning himself as the candidate for working people, for everyday citizens. And here you are, living proof that his message resonates. You're humanizing him, making him relatable. Which makes you valuable, David added grimly. And valuable things become targets. Sarah's head spun. I just wanted to help an old lady in the rain. And you became part of something bigger without realizing it, James said softly. I'm sorry, Sarah. This is my fault. Stop apologizing, Sarah said, more sharply than she intended. I chose to stay. I knew it was dangerous. And I'm not leaving Helen unprotected just because someone put my face in a photograph. Helen, who'd been quiet until now, smiled proudly. That's my girl. The meeting continued late into the night, discussing security protocols, investigation strategies, and contingency plans. By the time they finished, Sarah was exhausted. James walked her to her room. You were impressive in there, he said. Most people would have fallen apart. I'm good at compartmentalizing. Comes from working in a diner where every customer thinks their coffee emergency is a crisis. He laughed, the first genuine laugh Sarah had heard from him in days. I like you, Sarah Mitchell. I like you too, James Montgomery. They stood outside her door, the hallway quiet, the late hour making everything feel more intimate. When this is over, James said slowly, when the election is done and the threats are handled and life goes back to normal, I'd like to take you to dinner. A real dinner, not just eating together because we're hiding from assassins. Sarah's heart skipped. I'd like that. Good. He smiled. Good night, Sarah. Good night. But as Sarah got ready for bed, she couldn't shake a nagging feeling. Something was off. Something they were missing. She pulled out her phone and started searching news articles about Richard Blackwell, about James's campaign, about the construction industry scandals. Hours passed as she fell down research rabbit holes. Then she found it. A small article from 6 months ago, barely a footnote in a local business journal. Blackwell Industries announces new partnership with Montgomery Security Solutions for corporate campus expansion. Montgomery Security Solutions. James's company had done business with Blackwell, which meant Blackwell would have had access to information about the Montgomery family, about their security systems, about their staff. But there was something else. The article mentioned the project manager for the deal, a man named Thomas Warren. Sarah searched Thomas Warren's name. He was a senior executive at James's company, had been for 12 years. His photo showed a distinguished-looking man in his 50s with gray hair and an expensive suit. And in one photo she saw it, on his left wrist, barely visible beneath his watch, was a tattoo. A bird. The same tattoo Helen had described on the man who'd taken her. Sarah's blood ran cold. She grabbed her phone and called James, not caring that it was 3 a.m. Sarah. What's wrong? I know who the second mole is. Within minutes of Sarah's call, James's study filled with people. David arrived still pulling on a shirt. Helen appeared in her wheelchair, insisted on being present despite the late hour. Patricia, the campaign manager, joined via video call. And Sarah stood at the center of it all, explaining what she'd discovered. Thomas Warren has worked for your company for 12 years, Sarah said, her laptop open on James's desk. He was the project manager for the Blackwell partnership deal 6 months ago. That gave him access to both companies' operations. James leaned over her shoulder, reading the screen. And you're sure about the tattoo? Helen said the man who took her had a bird tattoo on his wrist. Look, Sarah pulled up a high-resolution photo from a company event. When she zoomed in on Thomas Warren's wrist, there it was. A small black bird, barely visible beneath his expensive watch. Son of a bitch, James muttered. Thomas has been with me since the beginning. I trusted him completely. David was already on his phone. I'm sending a team to his house now. Wait, Helen said quietly. Everyone turned to her. If Thomas has been working against James for a while, confronting him directly might make him run. Or worse, he might trigger whatever other plans he has in motion. What are you suggesting, Mom? A trap, Helen said simply. Let him think he's succeeded. Patricia's face appeared larger on the video screen. She's right. If Thomas is working with others, and he probably is, we need to find out who before we move. How do we do that? Sarah asked. James thought for a moment, then his expression hardened. We make him think he's won. We make him believe Sarah is going to leave. What? Today actually, since it's already morning, you'll tell staff members that you're scared and planning to leave the mansion. Make it believable. Say you're going back to your apartment, that this is all too much. But I'm not leaving, Sarah protested. I know. But Thomas doesn't know that. James's eyes were sharp now, focused. If he thinks you're leaving, that you'll be vulnerable and alone, he might make a move. And we'll be ready for him. David nodded slowly. We can set up surveillance at Sarah's old apartment. Put undercover agents in place. If Thomas, or whoever he's working with, tries anything, we'll catch them in the act. You want to use me as bait, Sarah said flatly. I want to end this, James corrected. And yes, that means putting you in a controlled risk situation. But you won't actually be in danger. We'll have eyes on you every second. Helen reached for Sarah's hand. Child, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. Sarah looked at Helen's worried face, at James's determined expression, at David's calculating gaze. She thought about the intruder with her photograph, about Marcus Rivera dying in the river, about how many more people might get hurt if they didn't stop this now. I'll do it, she said. But I have conditions. Name them, James said immediately. First, I want a direct line to you and David at all times. Not just security, you personally. Second, if anything feels wrong, if my instincts say run, I'm running and you don't question it. Third, she looked at Helen. After this is over, win or lose, I want Thomas Warren and everyone working with him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Done, and absolutely done, James agreed. Anything else? Yeah. When this is over, you owe me that dinner. Somewhere really nice. Despite everything, James smiled. Deal. They spent the rest of the early morning hours planning. Sarah would make her announcement at breakfast, in front of as many staff members as possible. She'd pack her things publicly, make it clear she was leaving. James would argue with her, make it look like he was trying to convince her to stay but failing. Make it emotional, Patricia advised via the screen. Thomas needs to believe you're genuinely frightened and that there's conflict between you and James. If it looks staged, he'll suspect a trap. By 7 a.m., Sarah was exhausted but wired on adrenaline. She changed into casual clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, the kind of thing she'd worn in her old life. She packed the few belongings she'd brought into her backpack, leaving the expensive clothes James had bought hanging in the closet. At breakfast, Helen sat in her usual spot, but her face was carefully arranged into an expression of concern. James sat stiffly, clearly upset. And Sarah made her entrance, backpack over her shoulder. "Sarah," Helen said, her voice worried. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," Sarah said loudly enough for the servers to hear. "I can't do this anymore. Someone tried to break in with my picture. They want to hurt me. This isn't what I signed up for." James stood. "Sarah, please. We can protect you here." "Can you?" Sarah let her voice rise. "You said Clara was the only mole, and you were wrong. How do I know you're not wrong about other things? How do I know I'm actually safe here?" "Where will you go?" Helen asked, playing her part perfectly. "Back to my apartment. Back to my real life. I'm a waitress, Mrs. Montgomery. Not a political pawn or a target or whatever else you people have made me into." "Sarah," James reached for her arm and Sarah jerked away. "Don't. Just don't. Thank you for everything. I mean that. But I can't stay in a place where I'm afraid to sleep at night." She turned and walked toward the door. Behind her, she heard James call her name again, heard Helen's distressed voice. It took everything in Sarah not to turn back, not to break character. As she passed through the foyer, she saw Thomas Warren coming down the stairs. He was impeccably dressed as always, his expression concerned. "Miss Mitchell, is everything all right?" "I'm leaving," Sarah said, not stopping. "Tell Mr. Montgomery I'll call about my final payment when I'm settled." She walked out the front door, down the steps, and into the waiting car, a regular taxi that was actually driven by one of David's most trusted agents. As they pulled away, Sarah looked back at the mansion. From a second-floor window, she saw Thomas Warren watching her leave, his phone already pressed to his ear. The trap was set. Sarah's old apartment felt strange after days in the mansion. The single room seemed smaller, dingier, more depressing. But it was also familiar, comfortable in its simplicity. David's team had been here first, installing hidden cameras, checking for security risks, setting up a command center in the apartment next door. An agent dressed as a maintenance worker stood in the hallway. Another posed as a neighbor doing laundry. "Remember," David said through the tiny earpiece Sarah wore, "act natural. Go about your normal routine. We're watching everything." Sarah unpacked her backpack, made tea on her little stove, tried to calm her racing heart. Through the earpiece, she could hear multiple voices. Agents reporting from various positions, David coordinating surveillance, James asking for updates every few minutes. "She's secure," David said. "All positions are covered. Now we wait." The hours crawled by. Sarah tried to read, tried to nap, mostly just stared at her phone. She'd posted on social media, carefully crafted messages about needing to step away and return to normal life, to make her departure seem legitimate. By evening, nothing had happened. Sarah ate dinner, a sandwich she'd made herself, so different from the mansion's elaborate meals. She showered, changed into pajamas, tried to settle down for the night. "Maybe Thomas didn't take the bait," she whispered to the hidden camera. "Or maybe he's being careful," David's voice responded through the earpiece. "Stay alert. The first night is when they usually move." Sarah lay on her mattress on the floor, so much less comfortable than the guest room bed, and tried to sleep. She was exhausted, but adrenaline kept her wired. At 11:47 p.m., she heard it. A soft scraping sound near her window. "David," she whispered urgently. "We hear it. Stay calm. We're in position." The window slowly opened. Sarah's heart hammered as a figure climbed through. Dark clothes, mask, moving with practiced silence. The intruder crept toward her bed. Sarah lay perfectly still, forcing herself to breathe evenly, to seem asleep. The figure stood over her, pulling something from his pocket. In the dim light, Sarah saw it, a syringe. "Now," David's voice shouted through the earpiece. The door burst open. Lights blazed. The figure spun, but agents were already on him, tackling him to the ground. Someone yanked off his mask. It wasn't Thomas Warren. It was a man Sarah didn't recognize, mid-30s, professionally dressed beneath his dark clothing. As agents cuffed him, David pulled the syringe from his hand. Sedative, David said grimly. Strong enough to knock her out for hours. Maybe permanently. Sarah sat up, shaking. Who is he? Let's find out. David pulled the man to his feet. Who hired you? The man said nothing, his expression blank. You're going to jail for attempted murder, David continued. But if you cooperate, tell us who sent you, things might go easier. Still nothing. Then Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Nice try. But you really should check on Helen. Sarah's blood turned to ice. It's a distraction. Thomas knew we'd be watching me. He's going after Helen. She was already running for the door, agents scrambling to follow. David was on his radio. All units at the mansion, code red. Possible threat to Mrs. Montgomery. They piled into cars and raced through Chicago's streets. Sarah's mind spun with worst-case scenarios. Had they walked right into Thomas's plan? Had he wanted them focused on her while he went after Helen? When they screeched up to the mansion, everything looked normal. Too normal. Sarah jumped out before the car fully stopped, running up the steps. James met her at the door, his face pale. Where's your mother? Sarah demanded. Her room. David's team is with her. But Sarah. He looked shaken. We found something. He led her to his study. On the desk was a small device. Black, metallic, professional. A bomb. Sarah whispered. A listening device, James corrected. We found 3 of them in the house during the search. 1 in my study, 1 in Mom's room, 1 in the security office. Thomas has been listening to everything for months. Which means he knew, Sarah said, understanding dawning. He knew we were setting a trap. He knew I wasn't really leaving. The man at your apartment was a decoy, David said, entering the study. A distraction to make us think we'd caught them. But the real threat is still here. Thomas Warren's voice came from the doorway. Everyone spun. Thomas stood there in an expensive suit, smiling calmly. And behind him, he held Helen's wheelchair, one hand resting on her shoulder. In his other hand was a gun. Hello, James, Thomas said pleasantly. I think it's time we had a conversation. The study went deadly silent. David's hand moved toward his weapon, but Thomas shook his head. I wouldn't. By the time your gun clears the holster, I'll have shot your Mrs. Montgomery. And that would be unfortunate for everyone. Thomas, what are you doing? James's voice was carefully controlled, but Sarah could see the fear in his eyes. What I should have done months ago, Thomas said. Protecting my interests. Did you really think you could destroy Richard Blackwell without consequences? The man has built an empire, James. An empire that employs thousands of people, including me. You work for me, James said. I work for money, Thomas corrected. And Blackwell pays better than you ever did. He's been paying me for years to keep tabs on your operations, to feed him information. It was a nice side income. Helen's hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair. You betrayed my son for money? Don't be so dramatic. It was just business intelligence. Corporate espionage. Harmless. Thomas's smile faded. Until James decided to play hero. Until he started gathering evidence against Blackwell, threatening to expose everything. That's when Blackwell told me to take more active measures. You hired the men who tried to kill my mother, James said, his voice low and dangerous. Not kill. Discourage. If your mother had died in that unfortunate accident, you'd have been too grief-stricken to continue the campaign. Too distracted to keep investigating Blackwell. It was a clean solution. Thomas looked at Sarah with something like annoyance. Until you interfered. I saved a human life, Sarah said, her voice steady despite her fear. Something you clearly don't understand. I understand self-preservation. I understand that when powerful men give you orders, you follow them. Otherwise, you end up like Marcus Rivera, at the bottom of a river. You killed him. Helen gasped. Blackwell's people did. The boy was sloppy, left evidence. He had to be eliminated. Thomas said it casually, like discussing the weather. Just like I'll eliminate anyone else who threatens this operation. So what's your plan? David asked, his hand still hovering near his weapon. You shoot Mrs. Montgomery, and then what? We have dozens of agents in this house. You'll never make it out. I don't need to make it out, Thomas said. I just need to make a point. James, you're going to call a press conference tomorrow. You're going to announce you're withdrawing from the gubernatorial race. You're going to destroy all the evidence you've gathered against Blackwell. And you're going to publicly apologize for any unfounded accusations you may have made. And if I don't? Thomas pressed the gun harder against Helen's shoulder. She winced. Then your mother dies. And then Miss Mitchell dies. And then anyone else you care about dies, one by one, until you comply. Blackwell has unlimited resources and patience. Sarah saw James's face, the calculation, the desperation, the fear. He was actually considering it. Don't, Sarah said firmly. Don't give in to him, James. She's right, Helen said, her voice surprisingly strong. Don't let them win, son. Not even for me. How touching, Thomas sneered. But let me make this simple. What happened next occurred in seconds. Helen suddenly slammed her wheelchair backward, ramming into Thomas's legs. He stumbled, surprised. Sarah didn't think, she just moved, grabbing a heavy book from the desk and hurling it at Thomas's gun hand. The gun went off, the shot deafening in the enclosed space. But Helen had already rolled away, and the bullet hit the wall. David and 3 other agents rushed forward, tackling Thomas to the ground. The gun skittered across the floor. Thomas fought, but he was outnumbered. Within moments, he was cuffed and being dragged to his feet, blood trickling from his nose where someone's elbow had connected. You can't prove anything. Thomas spit. I'll lawyer up. I'll walk. Actually, James said, his voice deadly calm. We can prove everything. Those listening devices you planted? We found them 2 days ago. We've been feeding you false information ever since. Every conversation you thought you were hearing was carefully scripted. Thomas's face went pale. And that performance you just gave? James continued. Confessing to conspiracy, attempted murder, and actual murder? That was all recorded. Multiple cameras, multiple witnesses, all admissible in court. David held up his phone, showing the video of Thomas's confession. You just handed us everything we need to take down both you and Blackwell. Thomas sagged in the agent's grip, realizing he'd been completely outplayed. As they dragged him away, still protesting, Sarah ran to Helen. Are you okay? That was incredibly dangerous. Helen smiled, though her hands were shaking. I'm tougher than I look, dear. Nobody threatens my boy and gets away with it. James knelt beside his mother, checking her over. Mom, you could have been shot. But I wasn't. We're all fine. Helen looked between James and Sarah. Thanks to Sarah's quick thinking. That book throw was impressive. Softball team in high school, Sarah said, trying to smile through the adrenaline crash. Never thought those skills would come in handy quite like this. David returned, looking satisfied. Thomas is talking now. Naming names, giving us everything. Blackwell won't see the end of the week before he's arrested. It's over. Sarah felt her legs go weak. James caught her, his arm around her waist. It's okay, he said softly. You're safe. It's really over. And finally, Sarah let 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment. Not the cramped room with a mattress on the floor, but a real apartment near the University of Chicago campus. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, sunlight streaming through actual windows. She adjusted the collar of her white coat, still not quite believing it was real. Her first day of nursing school started in an hour. There was a knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find Helen in her wheelchair, pushed by a new assistant, this one thoroughly vetted and trusted. Helen beamed up at her. "Look at you. A real nursing student." "Not just a student," Sarah corrected, smiling. "A scholarship recipient, thanks to a certain stubborn woman who wouldn't take no for an answer." After Thomas Warren's arrest, the full extent of Richard Blackwell's corruption had come to light. The investigation uncovered years of fraud, bribery, and worse. Blackwell was currently in prison awaiting trial, his empire dismantled. James had continued his gubernatorial campaign and won in a landslide. Turns out, people really did want a leader who stood up to corruption, even when it was dangerous. And true to his promise, James had set up a full scholarship for Sarah. Tuition, books, living expenses, everything she needed to pursue her dream. "Are you nervous?" Helen asked, wheeling into the apartment. "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "What if I'm not smart enough? What if I can't keep up?" "Nonsense. You carried a grown woman through a rainstorm and then helped take down a criminal conspiracy. Nursing school will be easy compared to that." They sat together, Sarah making tea like they'd done so many times over the past months. Helen had become like family, the mother Sarah had lost, the friend she'd never really had time for before. "James is upset he couldn't be here this morning," Helen said. "Governor stuff. Budget meetings or something boring." "I understand. He's busy running the state." Hum. Helen's eyes twinkled. "Though I notice you two have been seeing each other quite a bit. Weekly dinners. Movie nights. Long walks in the park." Sarah blushed. "We're friends." "Friends who look at each other like that are usually called something else," Helen said knowingly. It was true. Over the past 3 months, Sarah and James had grown closer. The danger was over, but their connection remained. He was different when it was just the two of them. Less the intimidating billionaire governor, more just James. Funny, thoughtful, kind. "He hasn't said anything," Sarah protested weakly. "Because he's being respectful. He doesn't want you to feel pressured or like you owe him anything. But trust me, child, my son is head over heels. He just doesn't want to rush you." Sarah thought about their last dinner, how James had reached for her hand across the table, how natural it had felt. How right. "Maybe I don't want him to wait," Sarah said quietly. Helen clapped her hands together. "Finally. I thought I'd have to lock you two in a room together." They talked until it was time for Sarah to leave for her first class. Helen insisted on taking a photo, for posterity, of Sarah in her white coat. As Sarah gathered her books, Helen caught her hand. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. Not just for getting into school, but for who you are. You saved my life, yes. But you also reminded all of us, that kindness still exists in the world. That's worth more than all James's money." Sarah hugged her tightly. "Thank you. For everything." "No, dear child. Thank you." Sarah's first day of nursing school was overwhelming in the best way. Lectures on anatomy, physiology, patient care. She scribbled notes frantically, her mind soaking up information like a sponge. During lunch, she sat in the campus cafeteria, eating a sandwich and reviewing her notes. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. "How's the first day? Saving lives yet?" Sarah smiled and typed back. "Not yet, but give me 4 years. How's running the state? Boring compared to catching you up on crime fighting. Dinner tonight? I have news." "Sure. Same place?" "Actually, I was thinking somewhere different. More special. Pick you up at 7? Sarah's heart skipped. "It's a date." She stared at her phone, realizing what she'd typed. It's a date. Was it? Did she want it to be? Another text came through. Yes, it is. Finally. Been trying to ask you for 3 months. Sarah laughed out loud, getting strange looks from nearby students. She didn't care. James picked her up at exactly 7 p.m., wearing a suit but no tie, looking relaxed and happy. He held the car door open for her. He was driving himself, no chauffeur tonight. Where are we going? Sarah asked. You'll see. They drove through Chicago as the sun set, the city lights beginning to sparkle. James was different tonight. Nervous, excited, younger somehow. They pulled up to a building Sarah recognized, the construction site where she used to work. But it looked completely different now. The building was finished, gleaming with new glass and steel. What is this? Sarah asked as James led her inside. Remember when I said I wanted to use my position to help people? To fight corruption and make actual change? Yes. They took an elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Sarah gasped. It was a medical clinic. Brand new, state-of-the-art, beautiful. Through the windows, she could see the neighborhood where she'd lived, where she'd worked, where she'd struggled. This is the Montgomery Free Clinic, James said. Free medical care for anyone who needs it, regardless of ability to pay. We open next month. Sarah walked through the empty facility, touching the exam tables, the medical equipment, the waiting room chairs. And this, James continued, leading her to a private office, is your office. When you graduate, if you want it. Head nurse. You design the programs, train the staff, help the people in this community the way you helped my mother. Sarah turned to him, tears streaming down her face. James, I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. Say you'll keep being the person you are, someone who stops in the rain when everyone else walks by. She stepped close to him, looking up into his eyes. Why are you doing all this? Because you changed my life, Sarah Mitchell. You saved my mother, yes. But you also reminded me why I wanted to help people in the first place. You showed me what real courage looks like. What real kindness looks like. He reached up, gently wiping away her tears. And because I'm falling in love with you. Have been since that first day when you stood in my mansion in your muddy clothes and refused to let me pay you for saving someone's life. Sarah's breath caught. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. James smiled, that real unguarded smile she'd come to treasure. Yeah. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Sarah felt something click into place. This was right. This was real. Not a fairy tale where the poor girl is saved by the rich prince, but something better. Two people who'd saved each other in different ways, building something new together. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah laughed. Your mother is going to be insufferable about this. She's been trying to set us up for months. She's already planning the wedding, James admitted. We just had our first kiss. I know. I told her to at least wait until the second date. He grinned. She threatened to disown me. They sat in the clinic's waiting room, Sarah's head on James's shoulder, watching the city lights twinkle outside. Thank you, Sarah said quietly. For seeing me. For believing in me. Thank you for stopping that day. For being exactly who you are. For teaching me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. They have to be given freely. 1 year later, Sarah stood at a podium in front of news cameras and reporters. Beside her stood James, Governor Montgomery now, and Helen in her wheelchair, beaming with pride. Today, Sarah said, her voice steady, I'm honored to announce the grand opening of the Montgomery Free Clinic. This facility will serve thousands of people every year, providing medical care to those who might otherwise go without. It's named after the woman who taught me that compassion isn't about what you can afford to give. It's about being willing to give everything when it matters most. She looked at Helen, who was wiping tears from her eyes. 1.5 years ago, I was walking home in the rain. I saw someone who needed help. I stopped. And that decision changed my life forever. It taught me that every person we pass on the street has value. Every person deserves to be seen. Every person matters. That's what this clinic represents, the belief that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. That kindness can change the world, one person at a time. The crowd applauded. Sarah stepped back, and James took the microphone. This clinic exists because of Sarah Mitchell, he said simply. Because she embodies everything we should aspire to be: brave, compassionate, selfless. She saved my mother's life. And in doing so, she saved mine too. He looked at Sarah, love clear in his eyes. She's also agreed to marry me, which makes me the luckiest man in Illinois. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Sarah laughed, holding up her left hand where a simple but beautiful ring sparkled. After the ceremony, they held a small celebration. Former patients Sarah had cared for during her clinical rotations came to thank her. Community leaders praised the clinic. And Helen held court, telling anyone who would listen about the rainy day her future daughter-in-law had carried her to safety. As the evening wound down, Sarah found a quiet moment alone with Helen. "Thank you," Sarah said, "for everything. For trusting me. For believing in me. For being the mother I needed." Helen took her hand. "No, sweet child. Thank you. You gave me my life back. You gave James someone to love who loves him for who he is, not what he has. You reminded an old woman that there's still goodness in the world." "I just did what anyone should do. But nobody else did," Helen said softly. "That's what makes you special, Sarah. You stopped when everyone else walked away. You saw a person, not an obstacle. You chose kindness when it cost you everything you had." Sarah thought back to that rainy night. How scared she'd been, how tired, how uncertain. She'd never imagined that one decision to help a stranger would lead here. To a career she loved, a family she'd chosen, a life beyond her wildest dreams. But more than that, she'd learned that the smallest acts of kindness can ripple outward in ways we can't predict. That stopping for one person can save not just them, but ourselves too. That compassion isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing we can offer the world. "I'd do it again," Sarah said. "All of it. Every second." Helen smiled. "I know you would. That's why you're going to be such an extraordinary nurse. And an even more extraordinary member of this family." As the sun set over Chicago, Sarah stood with James and Helen, looking out at the clinic that bore their family name. A clinic that would help thousands. A legacy built on a single act of kindness on a rainy night. She thought of her parents, hoped they were proud. Thought of all the people who'd walked past Helen that day, wondered if they ever thought about the old woman in the rain. And she thought about the future, graduation, the wedding, years of helping people who needed it most. A life built on compassion, love, and the simple belief that every person deserves to be seen. James wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" "How lucky I am," Sarah said honestly. "How one decision to stop and help someone changed everything." "No," James corrected gently. "Your kindness was always there. That rainy day just gave it a chance to shine." Helen reached up and took both their hands. "My beautiful children. My heroes." And in that moment, standing together as the city lights sparkled below, Sarah understood the real lesson of her story. We all have the power to change lives. Sometimes it's as simple as stopping when everyone else walks away. As simple as seeing the humanity in a stranger. As simple as choosing kindness when it would be easier to look away. The rain had fallen hard that night. But it had washed away one life and revealed another. Brighter, fuller, more purposeful than Sarah had ever imagined possible. All because she stopped. All because she cared. All because she chose to see another human being and say, "You matter. I see you. I'll help you." And in the end, that made all the difference. The end. Thank you for joining us on Sarah's incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of kindness, courage, and hope. Share this with someone who needs to hear that compassion can change the world. And comment below. How will you stop to help someone this week? Let's spread kindness together. Ring that notification bell so you never miss our next heartwarming story. Remember, we all have the power to change lives. Sometimes it's as simple as stopping when everyone else walks away. See you in the next story.